Welcome to the 10th Interdisciplinary Book Forum, organized and good afternoon. Welcome to the 10th Interdisciplinary Book Forum, organized by the Likhaan Institute of Creative Writing. To begin this program, let's hear from the director of the Likhaan ICW, Dr. Joey Baquilan.
Welcome po sa ating 10th Interdisciplinary Book Forum na itinataguyod ng UP Institute of Creative Writing bilang bahagi ng mga proyekto nito para sa Literature for Social Development sa pakikipagtulungan po ng UP Press. Ito po ay isang forum ng isang napiling libro. Sa ngayon po ay ang Securing a Continuum of Care ni Dr. Carlo Irwin Panelo at mga kasama. At ito po ay tatalakayin ng mga sektor na mula sa iba't ibang sangay ng healthcare system. Inilarawan po sa libro kung paano dinideliver ang ating healthcare system sa panibagong paraan sa pamamagitan ng mga LGU at kung paano ito nabibigyan ng pinansya. Ito pong libro ay parang pagsusuri at pagtatasa kung paano nagtatagumpay itong sistemang ito at paano pa mapagbubuti. Nakakatuwa po na ang mga kasama sa panel ay mga practitioner at talagang nakalubog sa sistema ng kalusugan ng ating bansa. At nakatingin po ito ito ay forward-looking, hindi lamang ini-evaluate ang kasalukuyan, kundi tinitingnan din kung paano mapapabuti ang ating sistema ng kalusugan sa Pilipinas. Kaya po nakakatuwa na napagsama-sama ang iba't ibang eksperto at dalubhasa at titingnan sa iba't ibang pananaw kung paano natin mapapabuti ang ating sistema ng kalusugan sa bansa. Welcome po dito sa ika-10 Interdisciplinary Book Forum.
Maraming salamat, Joey. The IBF is held once every semester and constitutes a vital component of the UP Likhaan's Literature for Social Development. Through the forum, the organization seeks to provide an academic venue in which to realize the imperative for dialogue and intellectual engagement across the various disciplines. In keeping with public safety protocols, the forum has been moved to this online platform. Over the past year, we have come to realize the importance of a centralized, authoritative, and reliable national healthcare system, capable of providing both guidance and resources that could enable the country, particularly those from the poorest sectors, to effectively and safely cope with the effects of this pandemic. Securing a continuum of care, the challenges of a fragmented health sector, authored by Dr. Carlo Irwin Panelo and others, assesses the long-term impact on national health outcomes of health sector reforms that have been implemented in the Philippines over the past 25 years, and offers an analysis of how the devolution of health service delivery to LGUs has reduced the effectiveness of the public healthcare delivery system to provide access to health services that address the needs of poor Filipinos. The book then discusses 3 structural weaknesses that have prevented earlier reforms from effectively addressing these challenges and thus improving health outcomes. Finally, it shows how these structural weaknesses have prevented improvements in health outcomes. This book raises questions and offers bold solutions as we move forward towards the goal of universal healthcare in the Philippines. It focuses on how the health sector, particularly the delivery and financing of health services, has affected health outcomes, especially that of the poor. While this book focuses on the health sector, it also recognizes that a broader set of economic and social policies and programs implemented by various non-health agencies are needed to influence these health outcomes. Thus, a multi-sectoral approach is paramount to solve our healthcare crisis. And so, joining us in this 10th interdisciplinary book forum are doctors and scholars who are involved in the study, management, and development of healthcare policies. Our first speaker is Dr. Paulo Medina. Doc Lopao, as he is more popularly known, is a community medicine and primary healthcare practitioner and educator with years of experience in local health systems development as the municipal health officer of the island municipality of Quezon. Since 2015, he has taught at his alma mater, the University of the Philippines College of Medicine, and has been a course coordinator for the UPCM PGH internship in community medicine since 2017 to the present. In his first year of teaching, he was awarded the UP Medical Alumni Society Outstanding Award for Clinical Clerks for school year 2015 to 2016. He received the said distinction for different UPCM year levels as well. Just last August 2021, Dr. Medina was recognized as the UP MASA, Missouri Southern Illinois Chapter Outstanding Medical Teacher for academic year 2020 and 2021 at the Salimbay 112th UP College of Medicine commencement exercises and Philippine General Hospital closing ceremonies. Doc Lopao is also one of the founding partners and founding vice president of the Alliance for Improving Health Outcomes, an NGO seeking to enable people to make health systems work for people, and is presently serving as one of its board of trustees. He is also a founding board member of the Philippine Society of Public Health Physicians. Please welcome Dr. Paulo Medina.
Afternoon to everybody, and thank you to Likhaan for the very kind invitation, and thank you to Professor Los Baños for the kind introduction. Magandang hapon po sa lahat, no? And as a former municipal health officer and now a current practitioner of community medicine and primary healthcare, I enjoyed reading Dr. Panelo's work and his colleagues' work, and actually, it evoked a lot of feelings and thoughts in me, especially since not only were they, very intellectually challenging, it's a very well-written book articulating a lot of health systems issues and concerns. But I was actually quite humbled because while I was reading what he wrote, what he and his colleagues wrote, I was actually having a lot of flashbacks in terms of my experience as a former municipal health officer back in 2009 to 2014. And my realization was, aside from just reading about this, of course, it talks about 25 years of devolution and how it has, essentially, the premise of the book is it has fragmented our healthcare system. The reforms that were being mentioned, I realized that I lived those reforms. And as municipal health officer, it was part of my role to actually try to operationalize those in terms of impacting at least the local health system that I was tasked to be in charge of. And so I really would like to start this by honoring, I think, the people who have tried their best to actually make the health system work despite all of the challenges. And Dr. Panelo and colleagues were very, very eloquent and articulate in identifying and elucidating the difficulties. And while it's quite sad that while they argue in their book that the improvement in health outcomes did happen, which is a good thing, it didn't happen as much as we would have wanted it to happen or expected it to happen over more than 2 decades. And that's the sad thing. For that's quite something that we are very sad about. But what I would like to point out is, as I was reading it, my realization is that it poses that challenge that we need to come together so that we can start fixing a fragmented healthcare system. It's entitled boldly securing that continuum of care. And I fully agree with everything that was said in terms of the articulation of the problems and the analysis. Again, as I said, I lived through that, through those. And in terms of the lens that was used from that administrator, health policymaker, economics point of view, the arguments really made sense for me. And it's a very, very good articulation of what ails the Philippine healthcare system. But another realization is that the data that actually was used and the examples that the book illustrated, if people here who are watching have also can recall, these were the basis for the assertion of the Department of Health back in 2016 at the beginning of this current administration of what they call the Philippine Health Agenda for 2016 to 2022. And as I was reading the very, very good writing of the book, I realized that much of it was really about establishing the problems that we have right now. And back in 2016, the DOH articulated that very, very clearly and very, very beautifully. Hindi makatao ang sistemang pangkalusugan ng bansa ng Pilipinas, ng ating bansang Pilipinas. No? At hindi ito makatao, lalong-lalo na para sa mga mahihirap. At siguro yan po yung gusto ko lang din i-highlight as I give my thoughts on the book. It talks about a healthcare system that if you were a non-medical person or a lay person actually, I don't know if you will be able to comfortably understand the intricacies of that particular health system. Because let's face it, we have a very, very different example or experience of what healthcare is. And in terms of the poor, that the book is really trying to point out that the poor are not getting or receiving dignified care, which is true. I think in terms of securing that continuum of care, in terms of what it is saying, I feel as a practitioner of community medicine and primary healthcare that it's missing out on that key element that at the end of the day, it's really about that common experience of what healthcare is for all of us. And if we experience the healthcare system quite differently, and you can argue that it's a matter of it being very technical or being a matter of governance. But at the end of the day, the framework that I personally espouse and teach to my students, which we call the primary healthcare framework, where we recognize that health is a social, societal phenomenon. Where is that in the whole assertion that just to fix a system, it's really going to be very technical? And while the book starts with a disclaimer that it needs a whole of society and whole of government approach to have these things be successful, I think that's what I would like to pose to everyone today. Where are the people in this conversation? It talks about governance and devolution and systems and forms of governance. And my experience, while I would affirm that it was very difficult to work under a devolved system, I think we cannot just say that to renationalize or re-centralize is the only answer, because it again removes the burden of taking care of this from society as a whole. And so I ask that very important question. I think at the end of the day, we need to be able to point out the values behind the technical aspects of what the book is pointing out. And while 25 years of devolution has come, and this is now a personal reflection, I'll end with this. 7 years have passed since I started teaching. And actually tell this to my friends and my students. I have a 6-year-old kid and a 2-year-old daughter. And after 7 years, I actually am quite scared that we might go down that road again. Because if anything, this COVID-19 pandemic has taught us that at the end of the day, we really need to have a very, very good appreciation that health does not exist in a vacuum, more so health service delivery. And so I do hope that my kids will grow up in a system that is much better than what they were born in. And that is where the people have to come in to take back that particular missing element, that governance aspect to fixing and securing this continuum of care. So thank you very much for this opportunity, and God bless us all.
This country. The next speaker is Dr. Maria Victoria Raquisa, co-convener of Social Watch Philippines and associate professor of the National College of Public Administration and Governance, UP Diliman, where she teaches courses on poverty, inequality, developmental state and governance, as well as on social policy. She received her MA in Development Studies from the Institute of Social Studies, The Hague, Netherlands, and her PhD from the City University of Hong Kong. Dr. Raquisa sits in a number of government interagency bodies related to social protection and is currently a board member and fellow of the Social Weather Station. Dr. Raquisa lived in North Cotabato, Mindanao in the early 90s, working with poor farmers to promote a sustainable rural development program when she was with the Philippine Rural Reconstruction Movement. She promoted lifelong learning programs with various stakeholders in Southeast Asia when she was with the Asia South Pacific Bureau for Adult Education, as well as the SDGs as an active member of Social Watch Asia. Marivic was part of a number of official country delegations to different UN conferences, particularly focused on social development, the MDGs, and later the SDGs, and on financing for development. She has published on the themes of social equality, the Conditional Cash Transfer Program, social policy, and the state of poverty and inequality in the Philippines. Everyone, let's welcome
It's big thanks to Likhaan for inviting me to share my thoughts on this very important book, which is actually a required reading material in my class on social policy. In fact, I was thinking that maybe I got invited to this forum because somebody got wind of the idea that I have a section in my class, a session in my class where I talk about this book. So every first sem of the calendar year when I do social policy. Sige, can we do the next slide? So I find that this book is really very brave because it says something that our policymakers don't want to hear. And that is that devolution, particularly in the health sector, has not promoted people's health, particularly the health of poor people. And this is very brave because right now the policy mindset is to do devolution. And yet we need to look at the evidence. Where did devolution take us after so many years, since 1991? And this book is one of the most, provides one of the most cogent analysis and not just analysis and the details to establish how and why we deliberately disempowered our own health governance system in performing its role. So it talks about how our health system looked like pre-devolution. First of all, it starts with the premise that the government intervened. Intervened by setting up a health system from local to national, because it knew that if it did not intervene very actively, you would leave the poor in the hands of the private sector, providing health services. And they knew that the majority of our people could not afford these services. So the government had to make its presence felt. So that's the starting premise of the book. And then so it set up its network, and then it talks about supposedly the effectiveness of such a network in surviving the devolution. And I'm sad because surviving is a euphemism. Why do we even have to survive is the question. Next slide, please. So it talks about the unintended effects of devolution, which it weakened state capacity. It lowered, so I already talked about this. Next. And so, it beautifully talks about how it was in the past. Centralized command and control over facilities, health personnel. There was a seamless type of operations, and it promoted administrative ease, open access to all users irrespective of income. So can you imagine how progressive that system was? And it was dependent on government subsidies. At this time, subsidies was not yet a bad word. So subsidies is really public funds that went to welfare, health services. No, next, please. So I won't go into this because basically next. And then it talks about the historical context. Why did we devolve? This was around the 80s. There was an economic crisis. There was a narrative that was put out there. This coincided with the rise of Thatcher and Reagan, the rise of a neoliberal mindset, where the need to privatize, decentralize, commercialize. That was the ideas in vogue during this period, and in a country like the Philippines, continues to be very much a popular. This passes for conventional wisdom. So because we needed to come up with a more so-called financially sustainable way of doing our health system, we started to introduce user fees. We started to corporatize many of our tertiary level hospitals. So that's why you go to NKTI, you go to Heart Center, mataas, you're already paying also top, well not top, but high rates, no? Because they began to be corporatized, and that was part of that neoliberal mindset. Sige, next. So this is my question. Was DOH devolution a policy conditionality attached to a SAP loan by the World Bank and IMF? Because the discussion of the book was great. It talks about how beautiful the DOH, the system of command and control, was working. And then all of a sudden there were some problems, and so therefore decentralized. But one of the things that we need to understand was decentralization a policy conditionality attached to a loan, a structural adjustment program loan? That's one thing I'd like to raise, because I understand that many of these, privatization, decentralization, commercialization, right now the University Council came out with a statement of concern because right now in Congress, there are bills trying to liberalize the retail trade. Right now, there are laws that want to give 100% foreign ownership, in the telecommunication sector, as well as the transportation sector. It's basically the same, no. So, and we know that a lot of these policies are something that our technocrats, together with the international financial institutions, they tend to like to propose, no. In fact, decentralization features prominently in donor agendas on public management reform. Decentralization, of course, is not always bad. It can be linked with democratization, but it can be a democratizing tool only under certain circumstances, and I will talk about that later. Next, please. So the book outlines and details operational problems that emerged as a result of devolution. So it talks about all of the issues that came out. Next. So fragmentation, nagkaroon ng weakened health system, it altered the incentive structure. Next, please. So, and so the lack of administrative control meant that the DOH had a hard time in coordination, collecting and transmitting health data. You could no longer compel lower level facilities to routinely submit reports. So it really created also gaps in our health service data. Next, please. And then these are the other problems, in terms of our personnel. And it created a lot of demoralization among the devolved workers and reduced ability of LGUs to attract and retain young doctors. So I was very touched by our speaker earlier, si Dr. Medina, because we have committed doctors still in the, we're operating on the ground, and we wish we had more of them, more people like him. Next. And so, yeah, more of that. So, okay, next. Yeah, so one of the things that's come out also is that LGUs have different definitions of who's poor. So when they give services, who are the indigents. In fact, I used to sit in one of the interagency bodies, the PSA and all that. They used to refer to the poor as the political poor, because the poor in different contexts depend on who the politicos think should get those benefits. So it's now dependent on political preferences, if you like, or even clientelistic politics very much determined who was poor, which is very sad, but that became a reality. So, in terms of determining who was poor from the perspective of PhilHealth had to step in. If the LGUs would not support and give the premiums for the poor, the national government had to step in. So there's always a huge role for national government. Next, despite what others want to say. And yeah, okay, next. And so, because there were all of these problems that were created in terms of personnel, in terms of systems, in terms of funding, identification of the poor, it created so many problems. And that became the base as a result of the devolution. And in a way, that became the basis for the series of reforms to mitigate the negative impact of the devolution. So I was looking at the content of these different types of programs, the Comprehensive Healthcare Agreement, Formula One. And when you think about it, a lot of these programs were meant to mitigate the impact of devolution. So it really raises the question about the wisdom of the devolution. So the IFIs with local partners, meaning our domestic policymakers, got us to devolve, possibly through conditionalities. And when this created problems, now, I forgot to tell you that all of these little programs, Kalusugan Pangkahalatan, health facilities, these were funded through loans, also from the IFIs. So we come up with a situation where up there is a problem that was created because of devolution, thanks to IFI policy advice with our domestic technocrats loving it. And then it created problems. And then now we have to come up with other reforms to address the problems that have been created. And guess who gives us the loans for those programs? If not the IFIs again. That is not in the book, but I've seen this happen in other areas. I've seen, and so it's kind of it really raises so many questions. Next. Now, if you look at the literature, devolution can be successful under certain conditions. In fact, it may be counterintuitive, but one of the things that's come out in the literature is that The key to achieving national health targets under a devolved setup is the capacity of the entire system to implement health programs at scale. In other words, if you want to devolve and decentralize, which is okay, it implies, in fact, stronger national capacity because this means that the state now will have to coordinate and act as oversight and administrative control. For the state to do that, it needs to have it needs to be empowered to do that. Because when you decentralize, it's harder to administer a system that's decentralized. So when you decentralize, it doesn't necessarily mean a weaker national state. No. In fact, what the literature, UNRIS in particular, argues is that you need a strong administrative capacity to oversee if you will decentralize, because then that way you're able to work things through. What we did, though, was not like that. We devolved at a time when, the LGUs were not prepared. We know that, we have sufficient data. In fact, many of the LGUs raised questions about the devolutions themselves. And even DOH had a hard time now, as written in the book, keeping up with the data from on the ground, finding out what's going on. So at the national level, at the local level, the two entities were not prepared. There was no calibrated way of doing it. And so, this was implied in the book. Next. Now, the book also made recommendations. One was to renationalize and look at and if not, so one was in the level of organizational, renationalize, and or organize service delivery networks. And I just want to say that I actively participated in the debates around the crafting of the universal healthcare law, and the book anticipated these issues. These were the issues discussed during the UHC. In fact, the SDN is now part of the UHC law. And so this book is an important resource for the debates. It anticipates, and it's an important resource for the debates. Next. And then it also talks about how public financing. Next. So basically, the book, backed by strong analysis and 25 years of data, courageously made its arguments about the problem with premature devolution in a policy environment that tends to constantly affirm it in spite of many challenges. The message of this book provides a cautionary tale. And I underscore this point because the Mandanas ruling will be implemented next year. And the Mandanas ruling provides additional funds for LGUs to do their thing. And many national governments, including DOH, is problematic because it also means less funds for them, for their own programs. And, in a situation where the book already points out the problems with devolution, and now we're going to do Mandana's ruling, and in the context of the pandemic, we are all very, very worried. And I've had very frank conversations with our friends in the DOH, quite frankly, on this. Next. Basically, I just want to say, by way of ending, that there are ways of strengthening services for the poor, especially at the local level. One is we need a strong Beberian bureaucracy, because it says that for us to be able to, before adopting more complex organizational reforms, you need the state has to have the capacity to regulate, and then address basic problems like record keeping, financial control. Are we able to enforce rules? Clarity of authority relations. These are basic features of a Beberian bureaucracy. If we could not even do this, and at both national and local level, and then you immediately start to decentralize and say, sa local na kayo, hindi pa strong pa nga yung admin system sa local, and then you say kayo na bahala sa services, what will happen to those people who need those services? And then we have to make sure that we provide adequate remuneration, regularize our health workers. Our barangay health workers don't even have plantilla positions. Their salaries are so small, and yet they are the frontliners at the barangay health level. If we really want to improve health services, let us take care of our healthcare workers. Next. And then another point is that impact of decentralization may be positive, but particularly in contexts where you will find that the governing elites seek to change local power structures in favor of low-income groups, and that there is a network of CSOs at the local level that can really engage local authorities and public policy making. So there are two requisites at the local level for services for the poor to really have a better chance. One is that your local government is modernizing, developmental, and responsive to working with communities. And second, you have a vibrant social movement, people's movement, CSOs, demanding, engaging, and claiming their rights. But if you have local elites who are either patriarchal or oligarchic, then decentralization can produce undesirable results. Next. And that's where I end my presentation. Thank you.
Maraming salamat, Marivic. Very interesting insights. What exactly were the roots and conditions that led to devolution, and has it resulted in a vicious cycle, a self-feeding cycle? Before we continue, I've been asked by the organizers to plug the social media accounts of the Likhaan ICW. You have there on your screen. You can check out these links should you wish to stay updated on the programs and activities of the Likhaan Institute of Creative Writing. Next up, we have Dr. Leslie Ann Luces, a provincial health officer in the province of Aklan. Dr. Luces is also currently acting chief of hospital at the provincial hospital and oversees the operations of 7 other public hospitals in the province. She is at the forefront in managing the integration of the preventive and curative healthcare system of the entire province. Prior to this position, she served as a municipal health officer of Pintuyan, Southern Leyte, under the Doctor to the Barrios program of the Department of Health. After 3 years of professional service in remote and underserved communities, she held the distinction of being the most outstanding Doctor to the Barrios in 2010, and she was a recipient of the Outstanding Young Aklanon Award in 2011. With years of experience as a public health and policy specialist, Dr. Luces is now leading the implementation of the university healthcare law in her province, working alongside the local government's leadership for missions to achieve health equity and improve the overall health of all Aklanons, especially the underprivileged and the most vulnerable. Please welcome Dr. Leslie Ann Luces.
Yes, magandang hapon. Magandang hapon sa lahat. I'll be giving my thoughts about the book, but I'll be zooming in the context of the provincial lens. And the book basically re-echoes my personal sentiments and views about our current devolved healthcare system. And being a government worker for almost 11 years now, initially as a municipal health officer for 3 years, and now approximately 8 years as a provincial health officer, I totally agree with the challenges and the weaknesses of the devolution brought to our healthcare services and our healthcare system as a whole. So listening to our 2 other resource speakers, ang daming insights that were brought in this platform, and Doc Lopa was even a colleague, we've been together with Doc Bev, sinusulong namin yung mga reforms, attempting to help out in somehow in our lifespan, trying to help out in making sure that our health system is improved and is palpable or ramdam siya ng mga tao. So one of the effects of devolution is fragmentation of our service delivery system and financing, as mentioned in the book. And next slide. So instead of a continuous flow of our services or our service delivery network, it has divided the system into a provincial network, a municipal network, down to the barangay network. So in essence, the province manages and finances the curative part or the curative services, while the municipalities and the barangays manages and finances the preventive side or the preventive care. And since the challenge is since the province has no direct administrative supervision over the municipalities, what we can only do is suggest, recommend, and advise as how they can manage their health system at the municipal level. And we cannot do any disciplinary action on any erring LGUs. So further, the leadership and governance of every local chief executive plays a huge role. Very important or napaka-importante yung sense of yung our mayors and our governors understand the healthcare system, being leaders in their own fields, in the municipalities and in the province. So they decide whether how many percentage of the budget will be allocated for health. Even if how excellent your doctor or your health team is, at the end of the day, it will always be the mayor or the governor who will decide whether health is a priority in the municipality or the province. So it is also interesting to note that while the province supports 60% of the cost of the devolved functions, specifically the hospital operations, it only receives 23% of the ERA. So you can imagine when all these functions were devolved in the provincial level, paano kaya yun na may make sure that the services that was devolved to the provincial level are maintained and given with quality service. So it is really challenging for the province to support the operational costs in managing several hospitals. So swerte na lang ng iba if tatlo lang, dalawa. But if you're managing like more than 10 or a lot of your hospitals, it is really a burden on your province to find financing sources. So if, as mentioned in the book, the LGU failed to upgrade or maintain devolved facilities, more so expanding it with the increasing population growth. So what was unique with Aklan is that we converted our 3 hospitals into economic enterprises together with the Port of Boracay. So when you visit Boracay, you are helping in financing our hospitals. So with the added income of from the tourism industry, we are able to upgrade the hospital facilities and hire more manpower since there is no PS cap in an economic enterprise. So kanya-kanyang strategy in every province as how they can find sources of income for them to finance their specifically their hospital operations. So another effect of devolution is that it has widened the variation of access and quality of public and private healthcare. Next slide. So next slide. So as shown in this figure, the residents or patients can access any level of care. So kung makikita nyo, pwede siya pumunta sa ospital, pwede siya pumunta sa district hospital, or sa RHU or the barangay health stations. So there is very weak gatekeeping mechanisms on each level. And what is glaring is that there is overuse of the Apex Hospital or the provincial hospital and underutilization of the BHS, RHUs, and the district hospitals. This can be addressed if the rural health units and the barangay health stations are fully equipped and capacitated. Then, eventually, probably there will be behavioral change of the community, and it will follow, so that they'll be able to access the first level of care, which is needed to declog the hospitals. So in an integrated province-wide network, the patients will have less difficulty in their navigation amongst the health facilities, and thus securing a continuum of care. But that is our hope, no? That we'll be able to fully integrate this entire system and not fragment it as to the barangay, municipal, and the provincial level. So I'm hopeful with the universal healthcare, the universal healthcare law, that the vision of an integrated healthcare system will materialize. However, because of the limitations of the local government code, it is very challenging to implement such reform. Although in principle, when we met with the mayors, they have agreed to integrate, but still they have direct administrative supervision over their municipal health staff, and thus the long-term institutional problems remain. I also agree with the book and the authors that in addressing fragmentation, there really is a need to amend the local government code, and that PhilHealth should only contract service networks rather than individual providers, but this will take a long time. For now, with the universal healthcare law, we need to strengthen our first level of care, which is our primary care facility. Next slide. So thankfully, the Department of Health has developed licensing mechanisms. For years, I've been looking for this. I've been a municipal health officer, and yet we didn't have this kind of licensing tools for us to guide us in assessing our facilities, whether we are at par with the other municipalities and other areas as well. So thankfully, DOH has finally provided us with this licensing mechanism. So there is a way already in evaluating the performances of each facility. So another important reform is the restructuring of its manpower. Next slide. For years, I'm sure Lopao is familiar with this. I don't know if the slide is readable, but for years, the municipal health office or the rural health units have evolved, and services have been added, but the structure remained the same. It was not amended. It was still the same. There has been duplication of roles, and it also needs to be expanded to cater to a variety of services that needs to be delivered at the primary care level. So with the slide, if you can see on the leftmost of the slide, we are proposing actually that there's a specific team who will handle the curative care. There's a physician, a midwife who will oversee the birthing clinics, and a clinical nurse who will assist the doctor in catering to the patients. Because alongside there is a huge preventive care structure wherein the public health nurse oversees this, so that there will be no duplication of roles and functions as to the nurses and the midwives on the level of the primary care facility. And also there needs to be an augmentation of the administrative side, because majority of the admin work is also done by the municipal health officer. Also, there are no pharmacists deployed in our primary care facilities. Some don't have medical technologists. And with the new guidelines of the Department of Health, primary care facilities need to have laboratory services, radiologic services, and the likes. So another area of improvement is institutionalizing evaluation and monitoring. Who will hold the LGUs accountable if they fail to deliver their mandate? So the government has spent a lot in trainings, in training our healthcare workers, but we failed to monitor if the intended outcome has been accomplished. And thus our investments became failed investments because it did not translate into improving the outcomes. We also need to improve on putting emphasis on quality of care. Most of our indicators in our LGU scorecard and DOH reports are quantitative. Whether how many prenatal visits do we cater, how many children we immunized. However, we have no indicator to know if indeed the prenatal checkups were done according to the guidelines. So despite all of these challenges, I still have high hopes that in time, we will be able to fully integrate our health services and see an empowered Filipino who is able to equitably avail of the quality healthcare services on all levels. Last slide. This picture was taken during the first meeting together with the governor, municipal health workers, and the hospital staff when we crafted our provincial healthcare delivery system, and with the vision of integrating the whole province down from the province municipality to the barangay level. This picture reminds me that there is indeed hope for a better healthcare delivery system if we co-create with one another. So thank you very much.
This opportunity to share with you our feedback on the book Securing a Continuum of Care. Perhaps I'll just limit my reaction to three main points. First is the what, second is the who, and third is the how. No? So in terms of what, I think the book provides a very good reference for agenda setting for the next administration, both for the executive branch and the legislative branch of government. However, we need to contextualize that for many pathways that have been set out in the book, if you look at stage 10, perhaps as the last or the most successful stage, we are not necessarily at stage 0 nor at stage 1 for many of these things. The recent laws passed in the last few years have put us in perhaps stage 4, stage 5, and this is encouraging for all of us. More importantly, for many items in the book, we're proud to say that we are working towards many of it already, baby steps, and perhaps the challenge for us is how to accelerate our work in these areas, or how to leapfrog in the sense of the word. I also would like to take note though that if we're going to be using this as a reference for a broader health sector agenda, we must not forget that in general, for populations, 80% of the population's health is going to be attributable to social determinants of health, environmental conditions as well as behavioral behaviors of the population. And so the book, which largely covers the other 20% of services being provided in clinics and hospitals, should be complemented by interventions which address these other 80%. In terms of who will be doing this, in any discussions of sino ang gagawa or who is responsible, nakakabit talaga doon. It's going to be inevitable that we discuss role delineation. Over the last few years, we've had a lot of challenges in terms of mushrooming of units within organizations, one after another because of certain mandates. But at the end of the day, the main implementers on the ground are single units, one RHU, one LGU, one hospital, and they don't have the luxury of having so many units, people, etc. And so this there is going to be a need to constantly review roles. Are there duplication, or are there widening gaps in terms of mandates that fall on the crack? And this is going to be critical in the second part of the WHO, which is how do we plan succession and how do we make sure that the organization's mandates are ably fulfilled because it also has the correct competent staff. And for this, the government in particular needs stronger, bolder efforts in building the next generation. But this will not be possible without also bold and committed group from the public sector, from the academe, and from the research societies in order to have a complete ecosystem, not just of implementers, of policymakers, but as well the research and academic counterparts who will hopefully make the exchange of knowledge going to be fruitful for the entire ecosystem. And then finally, to answer the how, perhaps what needs to be clear to us is that in implementing all of these desired policies or changes, programmatic changes, we need to be very conscious about how all of these translate or get implemented at the local level. I have seen the chapters that outline around 8 to 10 of the biggest perhaps disease-based programs that the DOH is handling, or that is the burden of disease in the country. And obviously, from an academic standpoint, we discuss them separately with merits, problems in each of these issues. However, we cannot fall into the trap that we've been in for the past many decades. We're in how these problems were framed, how the policies for each of these problems were drafted, assume that again, separate units on the ground were going to be implementing this. And so I think there has to be a stronger emphasis as we implement many of the recommendations in this book towards building a stronger primary care system. And repeatedly, evidence globally has shown how cost-effective and effective, or how far-reaching the impact of building that layer of primary care infrastructure in the country will be. And I hope that sort of becomes the tie that binds the many recommendations, very useful recommendations that have been set out in the book. So overall, maraming salamat po talaga for this reference. It would be really nice to have a discussion with all of you, and perhaps there should be many more of these as we all prepare, no, for the next administration's agenda. So maraming salamat po, and congratulations again to the authors of the book.
I'd like to extend our gratitude to Dr. Raho for taking the effort to send us that video since she could not join us this afternoon. Well, if there's anything we can glean from the talks we've had over the past hour, it's that we have a long way to go in addressing the problems hounding the Philippines healthcare system. And addressing the issues that have resulted from devolution is just the tip of the iceberg, it seems. Next in the program, I think we have some questions that we'd like to entertain while our reactors are still here. If there's anybody in the program, in the audience who'd like to ask something about the issue or about the book, please type in your message. Okay, we have a question here. It's been typed in. Dahil sa ganitong klaseng mga proyekto at diskusyon, magiging beneficial ba sa mga college degree programs na mag-require ng courses on healthcare systems and or medical humanities? We have some medical educators here, so let's hear first from Doc Lopao.
Magandang hapon po ulit. No? Napakaganda nung tanong. Siguro, ewan ko kung mag-agree si Leslie, but actually po sa medical school at sa mga health profession schools nga, kulang po ang mga courses on healthcare systems and or medical humanities. No? So yun na lang, medyo problematic na. Tapos yung added layer pa na ganyan. Ang sagot ko dyan sa nagtanong po na yan, yes and amen. I think we need to have a conversation about leveling off on what healthcare systems are supposed to be. The book talks about demand for health services. And ako my thoughts when I was reading the book, no, parang if healthcare is a right, the demand is always there. But the problem is, I think our general population looks at healthcare as a mystic thing, parang mysterious thing. So we need to really demystify it. And we really have to study it according to it being a function of society. Diba? Health as a social phenomenon. So my answer to that is a resounding yes. And actually, it's one of the biggest problems also in our field, lalo na po sa medical profession and even in other health professions. No? Hindi ganun ka-strong. And I'll be one of our harshest critics also. No? Hindi ganun ka-strong yung ganyang pagtuturo. Simply because, I suppose, unless you can weigh in, it's very hospital-centric service delivery. Diba? That's how we understand the healthcare system. But in fact, it's much, much more than that.
Yes,
So
you kept on mentioning the human factor in addressing these issues, I remember. And where do we get that human factor?
Yes, sir. Pag wala talaga yung ano po kasi siya parang kung hindi mo talaga naiintindihan kung anong role mo in that system, if you just view yourself as a patient, di ba, as a stakeholder, napaka-disempowering nung pagkakasakit, di ba, parang ganun. When in fact, it's really about health promotion. How do I become a better member of society? Because I'm healthy, di ba? So parang that should be where the demand comes from. And unfortunately, di ba, pag po may kakayahan tayong mag-private healthcare or middle class tayo, di ba, we never really consider public healthcare. But in this pandemic, sorry po, haba ng sagot ko, pero ano siya, no? Parang in this pandemic, we started to realize that, well, this is our healthcare system and we don't understand it. And that's very, very problematic. No? So yun po.
Thank you. Yes, Dr. Luces, would you like to address the question as well?
Yeah, I think I agree with Doc Lopao. No, when we became municipal health officers, I think majority of our training we got on the ground. And our teachers and our mentors were actually the midwives, the PHNs, the fellow doctors also on the field. And we learned a lot from them. And even patients, kapitan, even the teams in the municipal level, they were actually our teachers, because it's difficult to understand the real scenario on the ground if your training is hospital-centric. So you really need to be immersed in a community setting, and we're thankful that UP has that, no, Doc Lopao. I think we have 1 month of immersion in Batangas, and so somehow we were prepared with regards to how a community is being run. It's very different from the hospital, and the layers of command, the layers of leadership is different as well. And the skills that you need to survive in that kind of environment, in that kind of a setting, you need not just clinical managerial skills, but you need to have political skills as well. And yeah, so it's difficult to learn that in the context of a hospital setting, as I've said. So again, yes, we need expanded teachings or trainings about a local health context of a local health system, but more so, it's actually the desire of the person to know, the desire of the person to also be immersed. And as what Doc Lopao said, we need more people like this. This is a different track. It's not clinical based, but I think we're treating the entire population. We're not treating individual patients, but we're treating the entire population. And that's, I think, a valuable asset in the country. And we need more people. And hopefully we have more students to tread that kind of track.
Thank you
Over.
very much. Next question, I think, is strongly connected to what Leslie was talking about. Devolution has its negative effects, but does it have any advantages as well? I recall from the book, one of the justifications for devolution, for giving more responsibilities to the LGUs, was that, well, people assume that local government officials were more in touch with the needs of their particular communities, di ba? Which makes sense, but I'll let you guys discuss that. Pao, would you like to start us off?
Kala ko po si Leslie yung
Sige,
magsasabi
tama
as a
ko nga, no? Mas
provincial
bagay,
health
mas
officer.
bagay sa
Opo.
kanya, no?
I'll go after. Yes po, opo.
Yes, tama ka
yeah.
dyan. So Leslie, would you like to talk about that first? I mean, how in touch, does it make sense to you? They assume that the LGUs are more in touch with the needs of their populations.
Well, if we're talking about, if I was in that era when devolution was being thought about, kung kailangan ba natin i-devolve, I think at the time, the book says, no, there were financial problems, that's why they had to devolve it. And some of the advantages that were mentioned is better information about the preferences of the community, better matching of resources with local needs, greater accountability, and greater local participation. But those are just the advantages. If you're looking at, if you're putting side by side devolution and national form of healthcare system, mas madaming advantages if you don't devolve. So, kasi if we're talking about better information, yes, that's true. You better understand. You can have a better insight if you're on the ground. But the challenge is, who's the decision maker? And we have lots of decision makers when we devolve the system. And you have to have all of these decision makers have a better grasp of what a health system is. 'Di ba po? So, and also one thing is, ang sabi ng book, better matching of resources. Ang problem is, kung yung leader mo is also, how do you say it in a better way? If your leader,
Baka there's no better way, pero hindi mo naman yata leaderless. So,
yeah, my leader is really good leadership and governance. Generally, they call the shots, di ba? And if we have 81 provinces all over the country, we're talking about 81 different levels of thinking na governors. And we have mayors and we have city the gamut of the entire system. So we have a lot of people to really negotiate with, and to really educate. I was discussing with Lopao earlier, sabi ko, election na ulit. And well, not for my province, but 3 years, you've invested in training and teaching your health leader, your LCE, and then another election comes and you'll have to again train. And then the succession and the, what do you say, yung continuity of the programs, yun yung challenging, because there will be another leader who will come in again and might have a different mindset from the previous one. So even if kami as health leaders on the ground, we would advocate for something, but you'll have to channel that to your leader because they would always call the shots.
So in a nutshell, the problem there is that with the devolved system, the people making the big decisions are not necessarily in the medical profession or medical experts.
Exactly.
Unlike if you had a centralized system where the DOH make the decisions, at least doktor yung nagde-decision kung anong gagawin. Tama ba?
Somehow yes, and somehow no also.
Theoretically.
And also, a huge portion of our budget in health is poured towards training. Tama po ba? But at the end of the day, all of these trainings, wala yan eh, if your leader was not educated in terms of how they would manage health. So bakit wala tayong budget towards training our leaders? Diba po? Yun lang po.
Thank you very much.
Prof. Jerry, can I weigh in lang quickly?
Of course.
Parang very interesting yung comment din kasi ni Lesen. I do agree, no, as a municipal health officer, of course, in those parang certain elements, it's really difficult when the political system is very unstable, di ba po? But I think yun lang din yung assertion ko naman eh. Parang, well, sabi nga po ni Doc Leslie, there are advantages and disadvantages to devolving and also to re-centralizing, di po ba? So parang ang isa din po namin conversations yan, at least for those who are in the health sector, may argument po kasi na we devolve too much. Masyadong mababa yung, parang masyadong mababa yung devolution in the sense that in terms of economics of scale, for example, administrative and logistics, no, parang masyado namang mahirap pag munisipyo kasi yung variability nga po ng quality and the range of services as mentioned in the book, definitely that's a given. And again, pag po inisip din natin yung sinasabi ni Doc Leslie na yung local chief executives, no, ako po ang tingin ko naman dyan, ang mahirap kasi doon tayo nakaangkla sa governance, yung nabanggit po ni Professor Rakisa kanina, yung parang sinasabi niya that it's really just a few, no, the elite governing. And so parang it's very difficult if the elites are the ones who have a poor appreciation of what health is. But I think ang na-miss out natin, ako po, this is my opinion, especially that I am a primary healthcare practitioner, and yung primary healthcare kasi as a framework, health is social, societal. And therefore, yung participation ng mamamayan, critical siya doon. Yun po yung parang hindi na harness in the more than 2 decades of devolution. Di ba theoretically, easier dapat kasi it's closer to the grassroots, all of these things that we've been hearing. But we never really approach health and other governance issues as development issues. So walang capacity building for our leaders on the ground to actually recognize that the people have to determine the directions of where these things should go. So ako may ganyan din po ako na pananaw eh. So parang while I am going to agree to a certain extent na i-centralize siya, I think we're missing out on a critical point of what governance should be. At ang boses talaga po ng tao, pag nawala siya doon, kahit na-renationalize yan or decentralized, it's going to be very difficult. Kasi at the end of the day, it's the people who are supposed to be the primary stakeholders for health, di po ba? So parang kung elected ka na official, makinig ka naman sa mga electorate mo, no? Pero kung hindi talaga tayo malakas doon bilang mamamayan, this is what's going to happen, whatever form of governance that is. Ako lang po, yun lang po ako ngayon, no? Ngayon na I'm reflecting on governance. So parang at the end of the day, really, it's, kaya yung sinasabi ni Doc Leslie, I resonate with that eh. Di ba, Doc Les, nung tayo MH shows, sabi niya, yung critical yung experience namin when we were in UP, where we were taught to engage communities meaningfully. So that's something I think that should be, how do you say that, talagang imbibed by health professionals. Ang tendency kasi talaga po is to be disempowering. Services lang yan. So I know I'm the expert, no? But I'll end with this. At the end of the day, it's the people are experts of their own context, including health. So we really have to meet them where they are. Ako yan po ang ano ko, yung take ko dyan. So, yeah. Thank you po.
Thank you, Doc Locao. The next two questions are kind of related. The speakers mentioned the importance of succession and a deeper commitment from everyone with regard to improving healthcare. So paano daw makagawa ng mga konkretong hakbang at sino ang dapat tukuyin para bilang pangunahing tagapagganap ng mga polisiya patungo sa pagpapalakas ng primary care system na abot hanggang sa susunod na henerasyon. And of course, you can probably read the next question. How do we ensure that with this administration, which has just a few months remaining before, well, someone else takes over? How do we ensure this commitment to the improvement of the system? Hirap ng tanong to.
Ang hirap po.
Kaya nga eh.
No, but sige, Les, mauna ako at susugan mo na lang no, bilang ano siya. Siguro po reflecting on the questions and the potential answers. Sinong pangunahing tagapagpaganap ng polisiya? Yung roles po kasi talaga, no, bagamat there are elected and appointed officials in local government, even in national government. Paano ba siya sabihin? Parang sorry kung cheesy yung dating, pero ang talagang nawawala po kasi talaga would be yung representation na sinasabi nitong elected and appointed officials. Wala siya eh. So the system is very vulnerable to, gaya nga po nung sabi ni Doc Leslie, to the whims of your local chief executives. And if they do not have a priority of what health is, then that's going to be very problematic. Logistics issues and systems issues aside. So ako po, I think we need to win the hearts and minds of people first. And at the end of the day, it's really about ang hirap din po kasi from a healthcare patient ba yan or consumer ba yan or recipient perspective. Pag di mo naiintindihan yung sistema, wala kang stake doon eh. So the awareness of how the system is set up should be very much in place. And kung ako, ang sagot ko dyan, ang tagapagpaganap mo talaga ng polisiya, role lang yan ng appointed and elected pero laging sa tao dapat nanggagaling yan. And the good local governments po actually recognize the voice of their people. That's why they're good, no? And I don't know if Doc Leslie will agree with me. May mga organizations po kasi who espouse that, like Zwillig Family Foundation, for example. And disclaimer po, my wife works for them kasi, so sorry. But they actually value that your local leaders are bridging leaders. That's what they call it. Parang they really have to be able to get the people on board. No? So parang yun yung unang sagot ko doon. And with just a few months, yung next question po na transitioning to this new administration, ano kasi siya parang yan din yung isang issue ko personally. If you really think that the elected leaders, they're important, don't get me wrong po but elections kasi they're just one-off events if you really think about it, no? And while they are very powerful and influential, at the end of the the day-to-day operations and logistics and setting up of these systems, dapat citizen power yan. So nasaan ang boses ng tao dun sa usapan? At kung ang kalusugan ay mahirap maunawaan, vulnerable po talaga siya sa ganyan. So we really need also leaders who know how to communicate these things very well to their constituents. So ako yun ang how can we ensure our current administration maintains its commitment? Huwag tayong umasa dun sa administration at sa mga opisyal. Umasa tayo dun sa atin kasi yung need natin, yung karapatan natin sa kalusugan, hindi siya nawawala. Di po ba? So parang doon tayo
education, no? Education. Yeah, balik na naman tayo sa education, no? Diba?
Opo,
Or
kasama
going back
po
to
yun.
education, parang the requirement, we have to require awareness of healthcare systems and, again, medical humanities, maybe even as early as high school, maybe, senior high, para alam ng mga tao what's at stake for them. Diba?
Yeah,
Okay.
yes po.
So we're going back to the first question. Anyway, sorry about that. Doc Leslie, kayo, anong sa tingin nyo ang sagot sa komplikadong tanong na yan?
When we're talking about policy kasi, 'di ba? Sino ang dapat tongue twister,
Taguyod at pagkapagganap.
taguyod or tagagawa or yon ng pulisiya. So, of course, definitely it's DOH, 'di ba po? Well, comparing it to other countries, in Philippines natin kasi, although yung Department of Health naman, supposedly, no, hindi siya sana nag-change ang leader based on who sits in the position, no? Kasi hindi naman siya elected ang position. But, well, here, nag-iiba siya if the president is changing also. In comparison to other countries, say for example, Singapore, yung kanilang health plan is 20 years, 30 years po yun. And they have a 1-year plan, doable plans actually. So, pag sinabi, like sa amin, sa provincial level, pag sinabing, planning, 3-year plan, 5-year plan, parang ano kasi siya, drawing. Parang ganun yung dating na parang, magpa-plan kami, may mapupuntahan ba yung planning namin? Although, of course, essential yung planning, definitely. It's just for context, it's difficult to visualize, to create a vision, especially with this kind of frequent transitioning. So in terms of sa DOH level na yun nga, as what I've mentioned earlier, in Singapore, ganun katagal yung kanilang plans. And they're doing it. So walang palit-palit. Sa atin kasi, F1 tayo ngayon, after ilang taon, iba, kalusugang pangkalahatan, iba na naman yung mandate. Although supposedly naman, pareho naman yan. But for us, sa grassroots level, parang, so ano na ulit? Ano na ba ulit yung next? Dati may ganitong service, after some time, 2 years, 3 years, wala na naman. So, kaya wala siyang continuity. And so, it translates also, di ba sa book, bakit 25 years, wala tayong outcome? Di ba? Ang dami nating reforms, paiba-iba, pagalingan, ang galing nating gumawa ng pulisiya eh. And yet, sa totoo lang, at the end of the day, what we wanted is an improvement in the outcome. Okay? My research also when I did my studies in Singapore was maternal health care. And similar to the book, I looked into the gaps as to bakit nga ba walang improvement sa maternal deaths. And sure enough, when we dig deeper, ang daming investments, ang daming pera na pinuput in, ang daming trainings, etc. Wala because paiba-iba ulit yung packages na binibigay, walang continuity. Yung sa baba, yung BHW, lito na. So pag sinabi mo sa BHW, last time nalala ko pa may mga cheats pa noon CHITS. Napaka-effective nun. Ewan ko, Pao Lops, kung naalala mo yon. Ang galing nun kasi talagang merong template ang BHW kung anong gagawin niya talaga. And then the budget disappeared and ibang administration ulit. So wala na ulit siya. So again, yun yung challenging for us, no? With the transitions, sana kahit nagta-transition ang leader, yung organization, the Department of Health, sana hindi rin nag-change yung plans. Kung sa Pilipinas, meron tayong Ambition 25, mag-change na yung leadership next year. Ano yon, matutuloy ba yung Ambition 25? So, I think that's the challenge now for us. Hopefully, there are mechanisms wherein that we can institutionalize a system na regardless of a change of administration, that administration will continue and sustain the gains and the things that were started. Kasi, hindi dapat yun programa ko Kung ako'y umupo, programa ko to. Hindi programa to ng buong Pilipinas. And what I wanted at the end of the day is nagbe-benefit ba ang Pilipino sa mga programa ko? Kung wala, ang labas niyan, programa ko, pag umalis ako, wala na yung programa ko. Di ba po? So, the sustainability is really a huge challenge for the Republic of the Philippines.
And you think that can only be addressed if we, address these things long term rather than 5 years, 5 years. Yeah. It is mentioned in the book that we have fallen far behind. Well, I don't know how far behind our Asian neighbors in terms of life expectancy, as you mentioned, Doc Leslie, the maternal deaths and other aspects. And you think that this is all a matter of planning kasi paiba-iba ang sustainability of programs or lack of attention to the sustenance of these programs. Okay, thank you very much. You have any questions from Facebook? You guys can read it along with me. So I agree with one of the reactors that we were pushed to a devolved system to comply with the IFIs, utang natin. And that's left us with a lot of problems for almost 3 decades. The question, would renationalization help in solving the problems? Or do we need to adjust to what we have? Renationalization, interesting.
Ako ba sasagot, Les? Parang dapat mag-weigh in na lang din po kami. I think we cannot re-centralize hanggang doon sa national level. I think if we're gonna do that, we're going to be shooting ourselves in the foot. Diba? Parang let's not make the same mistake when we hindi pa yata pinanganak naman na po ako nung panahon ng na-devolve, no. Parang hindi kasi din tayo handa noon tapos nag-devolve. And then ngayon magre-renationalize tayo, hindi din tayo handa, no. Parang gagawin natin ganun ulit. It will create a lot of problems. And actually the book warns us regarding that. It's going to be the same set of problems, just quite different, di ba? Parang different lang. So personally, no to renationalization. But we need to re-centralize somewhere kasi evidence-based din po yun. Kumbaga parang gaya po ng nabanggit ni Professor Arquiza kanina, may ebidensya talaga na parang in terms of really administrative work, policy making, logistics, economics of scale, there's really an advantage to integrating, di ba? Yung continuum of care. So parang the book also poses those questions. And I think the direction now, yung gaya ng nabanggit hindi ko alam kung na-share ni Bev kanina ni Dr. Ho, with the Universal Healthcare Act, tama ba, Les? Baka hindi na updated, no? The province is being looked at as that nexus of re-centralization. And ako po, ang opinion ko dyan, I think swak siya kung potentially the economics of scale, the networks that are already existing, So parang kahit papaano there's already that backbone of that system. Ang kailangan lang din po talaga doon would be in terms of that provincial government, and I don't know, maybe Les can weigh in on this. How ready is a province to do this as a development, in a development paradigm? Yung parang talagang hindi lang to service delivery kung hindi ang kalusugan ay socio-economic development ng konteksto niya. Kasi pag hindi ganun po yung pananaw, parang ano lang siya, makikita lang siya as gastos, makikita lang siya as sakit ng ulo, no? Parang we'll end up with the same problems before. Parang nagkaroon lang tayo ng konting decentralization. So, in terms of integration, ako ang elephants in the room po dyan, Prof. Di ko alam, Les, ano ba yun? Di ba, may mga private practitioners sa isang probinsya, will they be under the provincial health office's jurisdiction? I personally think they should because they're part of that system. Diba? You have to talk about the governance aspects. And I think in fairness to that UHC Act, it asks those questions, no? Parang, sino yung governance nun? Pero yun nga po, babalik ko ulit dun sa sabi ko kanina, wag lang yun, magiging elites lang ulit yung magde-decide. Kailangan tumataginting talaga yung boses ng mamamayan dyan. And I think, pag national, ang hirap eh. At least pag probinsya, di ba? Medyo malapit pa kay Gov yung mga tao siguro. So, let's work on those opportunities and maybe let's reflect after, sabi nga po ni Doc Leslie, ano ba to? Ang plano ba ay 20 years from now, 30 years from now? O baka pagpalit na naman ng administrasyon, bago na naman yung gagawin. So, hindi po talaga tayo mag-grow. So, yun lang din po siguro yung thoughts ko doon. Les?
Thank you.
Yes, Lops, kasi hindi na siya plan, it will actually be implemented because with the Mandanas ruling, if everyone is familiar, there will be additional ERA provided to municipal and provincial level. And kaya recently we are having our planning again, no? Now the thrust now is that since it will be reintegrated on the provincial level, may mga devolved services ulit. Redevolve ba? Paano ba yung term nun? Kasi yung procurement before ng mga public health goods, yung mga vaccines natin, yung mga gamot, they were still being procured on the national level, di ba po? So now, they are advocating that mandating it that it's the province who will do all the procurement for all municipalities under their care. So again, ito na naman tayo, nagmamadalian na, ano bang term yun? Nagmamadali na naman tayo without having that time to really train and empower the team. Kasi like ngayon, kailangan na daw by December, yun na yun. And next year, the province will already procure all the medicines sa buong lahat ng municipalities, kami na magpo-provide. Saan kami kukuha ng pera? Di ba po? May mismatch talaga kasi ng policies that are being cascaded to us and the actual implementation, because you'll have to have that time element to prepare. So if it's really provincial level re-centralization, then on the PHO level, kailangan maayos na yung structure. Di ba po? We'll have to, if the procurement will be on a provincial level, we'll have to set up a back procurement team. Di ba? Wala naman kami noon as of now. And then immediately by January, kami na magpo-procure. So again, I don't know, siguro ganun yung system natin na we just do policies and yet there's a lack of in terms of how do you wala na akong term eh. Paano mo i-bridge yung policy mo into implementation na may finesse. Alam mo yon, yung hindi lang ibabagsak sa'yo, o trabaho mo na yan, bahala na kayo dyan, okay na ako, I'm freed up with my functions, sa'yo na yan, okay, bahala na kayo dyan, bibigyan namin kayong pera, okay, gawin nyo na yan. without understand, there's 81 provinces who will be subjected to this again by year 2022. So, good luck. Tingnan natin next year how this will operationalize because challenging siya. Down to the municipal level, wala nang manpower augmentation ng DOH. It will all be handled by the municipalities. Sila na mag-hire, etc. because they have the additional ERA. Now, if you have the additional ERA, how sure are we that that additional ERA will be earmarked to health? Kasi with the local government code, bahala ang mayor, bahala ang governor saan niya ilalagay yung additional budget niya. Maganda if your leaders are really health advocates and they understand the intricacies of the health system. But if they're not, and they're only after basketball courts, then good luck to us. So, yun po yung challenge also. Even if we are re-centralizing on the provincial level, but we have the local government code that prevents us from integrating fully. Pwede kasing sa salita lang mag-integrate kami kasi bibigyan namin kayo ng special health fund. Yung special health fund, yung leverage ng probinsya, paano niya mapapagalaw sa munisipyo. Pero, ano lang yan, special health fund. Sila pa rin ang may direct supervision over their people. Paano namin madidisiplina yon kung gusto ninyo na on a provincial level yung context ng integration and yet we don't have full control of the people on the municipal and the barangay level. So there are layers of challenges pa rin. So hopefully there will be changes as to the local government code, amendments probably as to how it should be in the provincial level. Para sana, alam mo yon, the context is there. The intention is there. The intention is good. I'm actually very hopeful when we were planning out for the universal healthcare. Wow, ang galing. I-renationalize, i-integrate on the provincial level. And then, after some time, oops, paano kami mag-integrate? Hindi naman namin hawak ang tao. Hindi naman namin hawak yung pera ng munisipyo. So, parang, in what sense are we integrating, di ba? It's challenging, but hopefully it's doable. I'm hopeful with the people now that's in the public health field, in the policy field. Madami pong magagaling, and I'm very hopeful that we'll find solutions as to this long-term institutional problems that we have in the healthcare system.
Thank you very much, Dr. Leslie. Dami na pinag-usapan ngayong hapon. And it's obvious to anybody who's been listening that we have a long way to go before we can make healthcare available to the poorest of our citizens. And I guess one of the first things you need to do is make them understand that this is a right. This is a right, and they need to hold their government officials accountable with regard to implementing programs and policies which allow them to access that right. Marami ka lang gawin, but with doctors like Doc Lopao and Doc Leslie around, I am hopeful that we will eventually make it to that end. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. Would you like to have any final words, hopeful words, with regard to the topic of providing healthcare to our poorest citizens before we end this afternoon session?
Siguro po, sige po, Prof. Konting ano na lang siguro, final words. No? Parang, my students often ask me what keeps me going pag mga ganon. Pag dahil parang, sabi nga po ninyo, ang tagal pa, ang layo pa. Hindi na to, Prof, altruism siguro, no less. Tumatanda na rin tayo, no? It's not really that anymore. We went into this, we are contemporaries. Actually, even si Dr. Hopo, was actually looking forward to having her here kasi we're really, we are 1 year, parang Leslie's 2008, ako po 2009, si Beverly po ay 2010. So magkaka-contemporary po kami sa med school. And,
ang babata niyo, grabe.
ano po siya, parang now that I'm reflecting on it, and where we are now, mahaba pa po yung tatahakin, pero sabi nga po ninyo, may hope lagi, and I find the hope. Hindi na siya altruism eh, parang well, I have kids, so this is personal to me already, and I think we need to make this personal to everybody involved, whatever socioeconomic class, whatever parang sabi nga po ninyo kanina, we need to make people understand that health is a right. And we need to hold our government accountable for it. That's where ako po doon ako naniniwala, that's where the change parang will emanate from. Because suddenly the people are, rising up and saying, hey, we're not getting healthcare. And in the pandemic, di po ba, parang everybody is now reminded that we are really part of this one system. And the system works sometimes, but not all the time, and not very well at that. So what does this mean to us as individuals? I think we need to be on the same page regarding that, and that's where we can start changing things. So yun lang po. Maraming salamat po ulit sa likhaan para sa pagkakataong ito na makapagbahagi po ng mga saloobin. Salamat
Thank
po.
you so much, Doc Lopao. Dr. Leslie?
Sabi nakakatuwa, it's been a while since I've had this type of balitaktakan conversations, and I think we need this, no? Lops, kailangan natin yung mga ganito because kumbaga left and right, we've been solving problems and concerns here on the ground, and yet it's different if you also express and have yung this kind of conversations with fellow workers also, no, in the healthcare sector. So sa akin naman, I think it's really a privilege being here at such a time as this, that we are able to witness a pandemic, that we are here during the time that the universal healthcare is transitioning. I think it's not, hindi siya anong tawag dyan? Hindi siya aksidente na tayo yung nandito sa panahon na to. And I'm thankful na I've chosen this path also. It's really my passion to be working on the field, in the community. Kasi I think this is where action happens, and this is where we are much needed. And so kaya nagpapatuloy lang kami despite the challenges that we are encountering every day, battling pandemic, solving problems in the healthcare system, talking to our leaders, and channeling positive energy to our health workers as well. I think what keeps us going is that, as what Lopao said, we see a glimmer, we see that light, that eventually really this country will have its time to shine. And kahit ngayon, ang daming challenges, madaming bagay na we think are very impossible to solve. But there's an end to this. And kaya tayo nandito. We are part of the solutions. And this book, sa totoo lang, it really was an eye-opener. And for the past few weeks that I've been reading this, it ignited a passion again inside na, wow, ganitong mga libro yung gusto kong basahin. And the book really speaks up on what the real situation is in the country with no holds barred. And this is the kind of book that I wanted really to delve into, because aside from you learn from it, but at the same time, you're also encouraged by it. And so maraming salamat po. This is really a privilege being chosen as one of the reactors. You've helped me a lot also personally with the contents of this book. It helped me in my journey towards public health, a profession, and also providing insights as to how we can improve further as to the level where we are now, kung ano lang kaya namin gawin. Because in doing this cumulatively, we can actually achieve what we're aiming for in the next few years, hopefully. Maraming salamat, Likhaan.
Thank you so much for that positive energy, Leslie. We need that. We all need that during these trying times. And with that, we bring this session to a formal end. Maraming salamat sa lahat ng mga dumalo at maraming salamat, of course, to our panel members for this very spirited and enlightening discussion. Before we go, I've been asked to help plug Likhaan's future events. I think they'll be flashing them on the screen. We have the Ganap collaboration with Lira on November 6th, 13, 20, and 27. This is a series of poetry readings that I hope you can all attend. And on November 26th, we will have the Madrigal Gonzalez Best First Book Award and UP Writers Night. Okay, very interesting. One of the finalists in the Madrigal Gonzalez Best Book Awards is a doctor from the College of Medicine as well, Ronnie Baticulon, and his book Some Days You Can't Save Them All, which is again a very both a difficult and a beautiful read at the same time. If you want to find out what the current state of our healthcare system is in the Philippines. Okay, and I think that's that for this session. Thank you very much for attending the 10th Interdisciplinary Book Forum organized by Likhaan, and we hope to see you in future book forums as well.